Case study: the inner ick. Butch is a slob, except he's the most irritating kind of slob, the kind who thinks he's not one at all. He's the first one to point out the stain on your sleeve, the wrinkle in your shirt, and always says he puts aside Friday nights and Saturday afternoons for what he is adamant is his weekly clean. He makes a big deal about the clean, making sure that nothing, but nothing, stands in the way of this weekly routine. As far as Butch is concerned, if it looks good on the outside, then that's what it is. And that would be just frickin' dandy if his life was mildly terrific, or reasonably fun, or moderately engaged, or even just ballpark average, whatever the hell that is. But as above, so below, remember? Just a glance at the barely brushed exteriors and a quick look at the mishmash of bits stashed inside their various compartments, and it's easy to see that the squishy inside, armored outside Butch is like most Don't Touch Me crabs, just quivering at the thought of being turned inside out. Which is probably appropriate, as there's something about those haunted Cancerian eyes blinking out from their hiding places that compels me to just want to crack 'em right open. But then, that's just me. Halt right there, you exclaim. Is this about cleaning, or is this about your bloody star sign, or is this about who you bloody are? Well, yes and no, I placate you with honey-like reassurance, marking that you've somehow turned into a bloody Englishman. It's definitely not about star signs, that shit's too complex to really broach here. Though years of brazen and misguided Virgo bashing by even the most honored of astrologers has left me acutely delighted to have a tongue-in-cheek jab at their expense wherever possible and appropriate. No, my friend, this is about how your essence, your life, works. This is about how you work, how your life force is directly speaking to you from your environment, a place linked completely into the molecular structures that comprise your body, your mind, your being, and your attitude. Yeah, attitude, man. Your attitude is just as inherently ingrained in every nook and cranny, every dust particle, every hidden discarded condom, every grease spit clinging to something as it is the way you see things and the things you think of, combined with the things you don't see or don't even cross your mind. The everything and oneness of your personal environment is a dazzling, laser-sharp, no-bullshit barometer of your spiritual essence, which just as sure as pissing in a cup and having some lab techo give you the news, reflects back what's going on inside you. What's going on inside you, in turn, affects your ability to truly manifest in that unique universe you're in. The universe that you are in the same moment the center of, and creating around you. So while the exact details in these case studies may not be specifically you, you have the smarts and imagination to make this an interactive fairy tale, with you as its central protagonist. And see that instead of having the long hair in the high tower and not yet having the prince, you have the short hair in the back of the minivan on the way to Spain, sitting next to the love of your life. And instead of a long cluster of gnarly hairs shredded and tangled in the vines growing outside your tower window, you've got a shitload of McDonald's French fries you've never bothered to get rid of stuck in that little metal bit that holds the driver's seat to the floor. So in this rambling manner, ducking and diving around each central character within each true tale, and including others along the way, you and I will begin to unveil your own story with all its magic and forests of thorns and its ultimate happy finish. Because sure as the universe, or God, or Bambi as you like to call it, likes a benevolent explosion, remember the Big Bang? The release you will experience in the discovering of your own truth, as revealed by the sickening, but to your own senses currently undetectable, smell of your cheesy socks, is the very orgasm the cosmos is pulling you towards. The discovery that leaves you releasing, sweaty and breathless, that thick self-protective wall around you in order to feel the deliciousness of the part of you that you've buried beneath a cascade of unwashed dishes or mediocre, badly painted portraits. But, back to Butch. As we've said, well, I've said, you've just been enduring my tirade so far, Butch is a surface kind of guy. He wears a suit and tie to work, a uniform that hides his real identity, and doesn't like to get things too personal. Quickly before you chew my head off, I hasten to add that there's nothing inherently wrong with a suit and tie, or any form of clothing for that matter. Well, actually I can think of a couple, but that's a massive segue into a whole other realm, and I really don't want to take that on, at least not at this juncture in time. But with Butch, his suit and tie is a device that enables him to keep himself and the world at arm's distance. It's part of his job for sure, and his choice of job, like yours, does not always allow for personal freedoms of unsuited self-expression. Personally, I wore a hairnet at McDonald's for a year, a necessary though not particularly personal implement that didn't have as much to say about my own individual choices, but more about management not wanting my lanky, grease-filled teenage hair wrapping itself around the chicken bits and finding its way, subsequently, wrapped around some unsuspecting customer's uvula. But with Butch, each and every job he'd taken had involved some kind of uniform. A not-so-curious choice for him to make, because as an individual, Butch does not like to be prodded, touched, scraped, or examined. He does not want the world to see who he is, because Butch's fundamental beneath-the-surface belief is that he's filthy. And he is! But not in that way. While being a pretty dirty birdie on all kinds of levels, good old Butch really has a heart and spirit of gold, and a deliciously soothing voice that should be featured on some radio program at night to lull us all to sleep. In our struggle for surface cohesion, which is my fancy pants way of underlining the fact that we have all been trained from day dot to believe that everyone we admire is exactly as they appear, the reality is that each and every one of us is a Rubik's Cube of disparate energies, searching to slot into place in our own unique way. Apart from entertaining you, this book is created to help illuminate those areas we think we are comfortable in, and actually not, without fucking with those areas we don't think we are comfortable in, and actually are. Continuing. A glance around Butch's apartment gives the immediate impression of a modern and fairly tidy, well-kept bachelor's pad. A few pieces of furniture, unemotionally accumulated for sheer necessity. 2 framed impersonal photos in the hallway give little insight into his character as intended. Like the suits he wears, Butch's possessions betrayed nothing of Butch. Which reminded me of my good friend Vida, who for years deliberately and through the expression of her environment subconsciously kept herself hidden from discovery. The discovery by others of her inner ick. None of this has to make any kind of sense to the outsider. The reality of Vida is that she's a super intelligent, stunningly beautiful, wise-cracking individual whose presence sparks up the room. But her interior vision of herself, as painted in the muted, emotionless, personality-less colors of her environmental tapestry, hinted at a deep need to hide from the world, to create a foggy nowhere land in which no one could find her. For the real Vida was in hiding in that deep and most essential, and to others completely inaccessible, part of her being. As with Butch, Vida's apartment betrayed not a glimpse of meaning, emotion, or personal taste. The photographs on her walls were all of her, that's another whole story, leaving no room for anyone else to infiltrate the safe harbor built around her, the protective insulation from an abusive and boundaryless childhood. Examining Butch's place, I came to find it very telling that despite the incredible amount of mental energy put into his cleaning, you didn't have to look much beyond a glance to see that in fact things were kind of, well, icky. There was something quite different going on in Butch's world, something his environment was clearly indicating he did not want to reveal. So it wasn't much of a shock to discover that instead of the cleaning he was so adamant was crucial to his Friday and Saturday routine, most of his Fridays and Saturdays, and pretty much every day of the week, were spent dragging and exacerbating his sense of shame and self-hatred through the grubbier realms of acute sexual addiction, leaving those edges and corners and underbelly areas of his flat to express the inner stagnation and disgust he felt within himself. Now, we are all inherent judgy-pants beings by nature. What's not important here is your personal stance on sexual behavior or preference, nor your individual take on what others call aberration, or how much or little you think that one should focus on such things. What is important is to put on your empathetic hat and get into how someone's environment can really speak to them, or how your environment can really speak to you if you'd only let it. In fact, another way of looking at it is that you've created this very particular nuance in your surroundings in order to speak to yourself about the very things a part of you does not want to know about, but which need to be revealed in order for you to become the uber god that you already are. How cool is that? Knowing that every reflection of us in our environment, examined, understood, and cleared outside of our bodies with simple intent, achieves the same effect within ourselves, saves us not only the bus fare to the Buddhist center, they're always so far away, but hours trawling the internet for unsatisfying distractions, thus additionally saving our brains and bodies from harmful rays and being overloaded with useless information. It's a win-win. While the porn industry was flourishing under Butch's insatiable browsing, no number of unsafe sex clubs, drugs, or alcohol could provide the numbing of a heart essentially yearning for connection that was at the same time doing everything in its power to disenable that to happen. If he had looked at his own simple surroundings, he would have found clues leading to the elimination of ick surrounding his being that he so longed for. This particular example is of interest, not just due to the immensity of the problem involved, but to show how within one tiny microcosm, a small and apparently tidy bachelor's apartment, you can build such an array of mirrors to scream "help" to yourself. And just how easy it is, once found, that your inner workings can be cleared. Butch's bedroom, what should have been a living symbol of rest, intimacy, self-healing, and dreams, was a sterile affair. Well, sterile in feeling at least. Just as Butch held himself and his emotions apart from the rest of the world, his inner sanctum was colorless and devoid of any show of sensitivity, sensuality, or self-nourishing. Despite his protestations of cleanliness, beneath his bed was an inch-thick, blackened heap of gunk that had, in the 4 years he had lived there, never been broached. While everywhere in the flat, the edges of the carpet had never been touched. This icked-up boundary was like Butch's own self-protective shield, keeping the world from discovering the ugliness that Butch believed in his soul was him. Of course, it's much easier to see from the outside in. An even grounded, uber-knowing Virgo such as myself can be bewilderingly prone to the quirky motions of shadowy self-subterfuge by the way of weeds growing in the entranceway that undermine the healthy bloom and blossom of our physical bodies, or windows so spackled with rain and city grime that our outside vision of the world can only be, likewise, distorted. When you start looking at your world through the as above, so below principle, it's important that you treat it as a game, as fun, so that in the midst of unpicking the wool that surrounds you, you don't self-harm. It's easy to beat ourselves up, but that in itself is a clever little ruse, which, by surrounding ourselves with the myriad bullshit voices of our past and presents, enables a different kind of foggy distraction into the midst. What we want to do is observe, understand, shift or eliminate, add or augment, according to what we find and what we feel. While it sounds simplistic, kind of is, the first step towards Butch's dramatic subsequent progress as a happy human being who felt connected with the world and good about revealing himself lay in attacking the gunk in his environmental britches, and by him being brave enough to declare his identity within his own space. The broad strokes that smashed open Butch's palace gates, so to speak, came through the painting of gutsy, earthy colors on the living room walls and passionate deep red in the bedroom. Textures replaced blandness, and one bold, huge painting of the dog he loved so much was displayed proudly in the heart of his home. And while all this sounds like so much feng shui bollocks, the reality is, when you get rid of the yuck and put in the things that make your heart, even against its initial will, go yippee-ki-yo-ki-yay, you can literally feel your nipples tingle with the newfangled, well-aligned energy you've pulled into your universe. The porn industry is suffering and liquor sales are down at the clubs, but Butch is traveling the world, engaged the love of his life, showing his squishy bits, and super digging who he is. Sometimes, a dog portrait is all you need.